Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming back for another episode of The Warm Up. Today, I am here with Caziah Franklin, and he is an outdoor adventurer who has really come into his own in outdoor spaces since the pandemic hit. So we are going to be talking about what the outdoors can do for us, and also touching on some of his newest projects, including an EP that he just released. So I am really excited to have this conversation today with someone who is just really utilizing outdoor spaces and paving the way for just encouraging other people to get outdoors and to take risks and put themselves out there through his Instagram and through his social media. So, Caziah, it is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking some time. Yeah, and I would love to just open it up and have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you. Where are you based? What do you do for work? And what's your favorite way to get outside? We'll just start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Caziah Rashad Franklin. Some people call me Kaz. I don't know where the whole Kaz thing came from, but that's a thing. I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. I'm currently based in Nashville, but I'm actually back in Texas for the holidays right now. I'm more of a musician than I am an outdoorsman. I've been doing music since I was 3 years old, just playing in churches and come from a musical family. But it was actually my grandpa who got me introduced to the outdoors. He lives here in Cedar Hill, Texas. And I remember his previous house, the backyard had a trail system, I guess, that led to one of the state parks. It was either Cedar Hill State Park or an area called Dogwood Canyon. I think Dogwood Canyon's more public land, so it's probably that. I remember we would just go on hikes because it was very accessible. It was right in his backyard. Then as I got older, I was very blessed and fortunate to go to summer camps, and that's when I started canoeing for the first time, rock climbing, but it wasn't any competitive rock climbing. It was very recreational. And then after that, I remember my dad would take me to Dave & Buster's or Alley Cats to go bowling, and I noticed they had a rock climbing wall, and there was a time thing, a buzzer beater, how fast you could do it. But it wasn't hard, it wasn't graded. It was a regular, rock climbing wall. But I would win every time, and that was my first time really climbing or seeing how climbing can be fun. If there's some sort of not competition, but if there's something challenging you, that was my first time being oh, it's something challenging. I'm actually enjoying. And yeah, just kept going back to summer camps, and it wasn't actually until I moved to Nashville for college. I went to Belmont for a couple semesters, and there was a recreational gym wall, and me and some friends, there was nothing to do one night, so we just went to the rec gym wall, and we were doing it, and there was this boulder problem. I think it was maybe this V3 or V4, but my first time bouldering, I've never bouldered. And there was this dyno move that no one else could do except one of the guys who was 6'1", and then myself, and I'm 5'5", so I thought it was super cool that I could do it. And then there was this outdoor store in Nashville. It's called Cumberland Transit. That's where I work at. And I wasn't working just yet, but I was going in to look at some climbing shoes because at the rec center, you either had to pay extra to rent. I was I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna buy my own and save money. And I was man, this store is so cool. So I was just keep going in, and I noticed that the employees are very friendly. They're very kind, but there was no one black in there. And it kind of gave me I don't want to go as deep as say PTSD, but it just kind of reminded me of my camp days. Because even when I was going back to these summer camps, or even when I was going back to Dave & Buster's or Alley Cats, it showed me or reminded me that I was the only black person in those spaces, and I didn't really realize it until I moved to Nashville. Because when you're young and when you're a kid, you're not really paying attention to stuff like that, you're still developing, I guess, in that area. So when I went to this outdoor store, it really showed me one, there's a lack of diversity, but two, people are willing to help you and people are willing to teach you things. So I just kept going back to the store. I wasn't even an employee. I would just go in there and hang out, and made some friends with the employees. And then I ended up applying there. And the general manager's name's Jason. He's super cool. My entire interview wasn't even an interview. We were just talking about diversity in the outdoors. He's this guy who does ultra marathon stuff. So he does like 250 plus mile like stuff. It's crazy. I would never do that. And he was just sharing with me how like he would do these runs. He wouldn't see any black people there, and he was telling me how
Hmm.
appreciative he was of me even wanting the job because no one black has ever applied there, and the store has been open since 1971. So even
Wow.
throughout our interview, it just showed me like you have the black community that kind of feels as if the white community doesn't want them in those spaces, but
Mm.
at the same time, the white community is wanting the black people in those spaces. So I like if anything I learned there's just so much miscommunication. And within that
Mm.
miscommunication, we're not seeing like there is history there. Like there obviously are some things that kind of came into play in terms of like why black people aren't in those spheres. But just throughout this job, it just opened my eyes to that lack of diversity, and it's made me want to be that change in my area, in my bubble there in Nashville. So during the pandemic, I started working at Cumberland Trains right before the pandemic. Um, and during that time, I watched this film called Black Ice. And it's about these Memphis climbers from a gym called Memphis Rocks. They go up to Bozeman, Montana, and they're like ice climbing with like Conrad Anchor, and it's crazy. So I watched
Incredible.
that film, and it just kind of like reminded me of like the climbing days where I was just going to camp and just killing it. But then I was like, dang, like you can tie in like the beauty of nature and comradeship and community with climbing. I was like, what? That was crazy. So during 2020, I was just outside. Like, of course, there were no gyms to go to, but I got just climbing outside. And once I moved back to Tennessee, I was like, Chattanooga's right at my fingertips. I have like East Tennessee. So I've been climbing for about a year and a half now. And it's just really a passion that found me. I had no interest in wanting to
Mm.
be a climber. Like I said, I've been doing music for years. So been climbing for about a year and a
Yeah.
half. And yeah, that's just kind of like my journey of how I got into the sport and got into the love of the outdoors.
I love that you've touched on so much already that I just kind of want to like dive deeper into because I feel like representation in the outdoors is so important and it's such like a hot button topic.
Hmm.
I feel like even within our company and like our team, we talk about it so much of like, we do want the outdoor space to feel like it's for everyone. Like, how do we make it feel like people are welcome here and like that they're comfortable and safe to like join into our community and like talk to people and ask questions and
Hmm.
if they want to be a part of the wild keeper program and all of that, it's like we want that to be accessible to every single person. And we talk about it a lot about just even what you were touching on about like the white community like wanting people to join but then like people feeling like they're not able to or the accessibility is not there or they're not welcome. And there's been a lot of dialogue that I've even seen through our social media of like, oh, why do we have to touch on this, like the outdoors is for everyone. And it's like, well, but that's not how people in underrepresented communities feel or
Hmm.
experience those spaces a lot of the time. So even when you were talking about growing up and like going to camps and like having your family like introducing you to the outdoors, I was wanting to ask like, even at a young age, I'm sure that you experience like I feel like there's only me. Like
Hmm.
I'm not out there seeing a bunch of people that look like me. So I feel like it's a really great opportunity to ask like, what was that like? And like I'm sure having a family member introduce you to it made it easier because you had your family to go with. But do you feel like that is a hindrance or like a roadblock for so many people to get outside when they're like, I just don't see literally anyone else like me.
Hmm.
And so it's not for me. Like, how do we shift that? Or um, like we clearly need to start introducing people younger, like getting people outdoors at a younger age. So it's like, what does that look like in your mind? Like, how do we make it more accessible and introduce more people to outdoor spaces?
I love what you just said. So I'll kind of pick at it from there when you said it's not for me. Um, I remember, I forgot what age. Like I've never really been a TV watcher. I was just always on YouTube watching like Jeep videos or I don't. It was really random. But I remember stumbling upon a couple of pages, a couple outdoor pages, and it was like rock climbing videos, like Jeep driving videos. Like I drive a Jeep now, which is funny. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember I wasn't seeing people that looked like me in these videos, in these documentaries. So like exactly what you just said, it wasn't for me, is how I felt. It almost felt as if like there's this entire world that I would never be able to step into because there isn't like this invitation for me. And it was discouraging. It's very discouraging to see like this room, I guess, or like this birthday party going on, and like you don't know if you can step in because you don't know A, how people are going to approach you, or B, if they even want you in that room in the first place. Like if there's no one really like inviting
Mm-hmm.
you in that space, it definitely does make you feel somewhat of an outsider. And like even at these camps, like to be granted, they are Christian camps, so it wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
I was just going into like a random like place. But even at the Christian camps, like I definitely felt isolated. Like I'll never forget. Like there was a
Mm-hmm.
canoe ride, and you had to partner up because it was like one of those long, I think, tandem canoes where you have to have two people. I think you have to have two people anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I remember I had the hardest time finding a partner. It's almost like
Mm-hmm.
everyone already pre-made their partners, but I was the only black kid, so it's kind of like who's going to be the black kid's partner, you know? Um, so like it's very discouraging. But if there's anything I've learned in the outdoor sphere, in the music sphere, even in the Christian sphere, I've learned that diversity is the goal we're trying to reach. But I think we're sometimes like trying to take a shortcut to diversity when we're forgetting two other key factors. I think that diversity, inclusion, and belonging, all three play an important role in this progression of seeing just this beautiful gumbo of people in all these areas. And like the way I like to like illustrate it is like if you imagine like a barbecue or like a block party or whatever you would call it, like a function. Diversity is seeing black people in those spheres. So like me being
Mm-hmm.
at that camp, that is diversity, right? Yes, because you see me. Inclusion is when you're inviting me to the table. So like inclusion is when someone
Mm-hmm.
invites me into their canoe. They invite me to their group. Belonging is not only do you see me, not only are you inviting me to your table, but you're talking to me, you're asking me questions, you're wanting to know my story as well. So that's what I didn't see growing up. And I think that when you're younger, or even like in my generation, or like for millennials, I think like we automatically see different colors of people in rooms and automatically assume that's diversity. But I think if we were able to like shift our perspective, like, no, there's so much more we can still do outside of just seeing diversity, we would see so many people in these rooms. We would see so many people just indulging into like these outdoor privileges they have no idea they can even obtain. So yeah, like my story, it definitely started out discouraging, and in some ways, I still feel discouraged. Like even at my local gym in Nashville, I'm still very much the only black person. I was just up in the Red River Gorge in Kentucky. I was the only black person. Like it's definitely still an ongoing thing, but I definitely have a more like hopeful view of what diversity and inclusion and belonging can all three look like together.
Love that so much. And I feel like everything that you're saying is so important about, yeah, just like there's so many steps beyond just like people, like even seeing imagery of people from other communities and underrepresented communities and things like that. It's like, okay, that's a great first step, but like, let's take this even further.
Hmm.
Like, and even when you're saying, belonging is the ultimate goal, it's like, yeah, like, we should be seeing people out in connection in the outdoor spaces everywhere. We should be seeing more people, and then, inviting people in. And then I feel like even the belonging aspect, it's like, yes, you want to feel like you are being asked questions, but you're also wanting to be able to just like feel comfortable to show up in those spaces without an invitation. I
Hmm.
feel like that's true belonging, is to be like, you don't even have to think twice,
Right.
which is what so many of us do without even thinking. We just go places and we don't even have to think about it. And I feel like that's true inclusion, is like you would be able to go and just like not even think about anything.
Hmm.
You would just go.
Absolutely.
And that is the ultimate, I think, goal, is that people won't even have to question if they're welcome or if they're supposed to be there or if there's space at that table for them, like they just will. And I wanted to touch on something too, like, I don't know how you feel about this, and I'm really interested to get your perspective, but like some of the things that we hear or like the comments that get made that I want to touch on are when people, I guess we use the barbecue example that you were saying, but like people are like, well, it's an open barbecue. Like people just come, like they should just show up and it's for everyone. Like, I don't get why it's so hard. And so I would love for you to just share, like, from your experience and your perspective, like why it is so challenging or like what that roadblock really feels like, of like why it's just like, I can't just show up at the barbecue.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't feel like I have the opportunity to just come in and that, like you said, like, I feel like I have to have an invitation. Like I want to dive into that a little more, because I feel like people that are privileged that just can walk into the barbecue don't get it.
Yeah. So I'm very analytical. I'm a huge like history junkie. So just to give like more context to like why I say these things, and I hope like what I say does not sound like elitist or up here. Like I hope you hear my heart when I say this. The concept of the outdoors is not new to Black people. Like if you date way back to like the Northern Flight or like the Underground Railroad, like Black people used the stars to navigate freedom. We swam through rivers, we went through deserts. So the concept of adventure, like the vagabond mentality, the cowboy mentality, it's not new. Like the first cowboys in Texas, like I'm from Texas, were Black. They escaped west. Like it's not new, but what you had hinder the Black people from the outdoors is like Jim Crow. In the fact that most people don't know that Black people couldn't even enter national parks until like 1967, I believe. Like there were so many hindrances that disabled Black people from experiencing these things. So when I like use vernacular or nomenclature, like we have to be invited, literally, like we couldn't get in. Like there are so many things that were set up so that we couldn't get in. And then you also have like financial implications. Like I'm a climber. I also ski. I was just in Park City, Utah. Like I know how much gear costs. Like there's so it's almost like the sports have become elitist because of financial implications as well. So you have definitely like a more federal, more like historical block. But then you also now have like a financial block. So let's go back to Memphis Rocks, for example, the gym in Memphis with the film. What I love about their mission is it's a nonprofit gym, and they don't deny anyone. I can't say the word. They don't deny entrance to anyone, despite whether they can pay or not. So I think it's initiatives like that where it's definitely like you don't have to be invited; it's just there. And I see more gyms doing it. Like I see more local spaces doing things like, like even if you can't like pay, we can do like a pay up front kind of thing, so like someone can like donate for you, which I think is really cool as well. So there's definitely like more initiatives going on that is abolishing just that invitational event, because you're right, I don't think that an invitational event doesn't have to be there. Where I think the invitational event should stay, though, is the more relational factor of still getting to know people, because I do think there is something special about, hey, I see you, I want you to sit with me. So I think when we're talking about like the room, I shouldn't have to wait for you to tell me if I can be in the room or not. But what will make me feel seen and heard by you is when you are like, hey, do you know belay partner? Let's climb together. I still think there's a beautiful part of like brotherhood and comradeship when we still like see people and invite people just for who they are, and not for what we see.
Yeah, I love that. It's like it's reaching out for that connection, right? And saying like, oh, you're here, and now I want to invest, and I want to like create this bridge between us. And I think that's really important. And I feel like that's kind of how you came across our radar too, is like during the pandemic, we had like come across your Instagram, and like the social media lead at Keep Me for Wild's name is Lauren. And Lauren and I were going back and forth like, oh my gosh, I love what he's saying. Like, I love what you're sharing. Like, he's getting outside and he's like really talking about like taking risk, and the fact that there isn't a lot of people like out climbing that are like either they're not from underrepresented communities or they're not as new to the experience as you are. But I feel like you were just bringing so much attention to the situations, I guess, that you were coming in contact with every time you were going out like climbing, and you became like the voice for it, and you were advocating for people taking risk to be that person, be the one person that goes. Maybe you are the only Black person in that experience or in that environment, but like the fact that you're going is like allowing other people to feel like they are also allowed to go and do these things too, and to be that person and be the leader, be the voice of your community. And I thought that that was so empowering. So I guess that's my next kind of segue, is to have you talk about like when you started getting back into climbing and you were going out during the pandemic and you were spending all of your time outside, and you were the only person that was going into these spaces as a Black man. Like, I feel like you probably had to put yourself in so many positions where you're just like, yep, I'm the only one here, and like it might be uncomfortable for me, but I'm going to keep showing up and use my voice and use my person to like say like I deserve to be in this space too. Have you had people reach out to you and say like, thank you, you're inspiring me to take it too? Or like, have you had people come and join you? Like, what has that been like? Because I feel like you've been vocalizing it so much that it has to inspire other people.
Yeah. Even a couple of days ago, this guy DM'd me, and it was a Hispanic guy, I believe, and he was just saying like, hey, stumbled across your page. Had no idea you were like this vocal about the outdoors and stuff. And he just said, thank you for being an example. Like, it was just as short, as sweet as that. Like, thank you for being an example. And that was never my goal. Like, if I'm being honest, my goal was never to receive accolades like that. My goal was just being the example I never saw. Like I never really had anyone to reach out to be like, thank you for being the, like, you know what I mean? So, it wasn't really my goal to kind of like be in the position where I am now. It was more so I was just frustrated of the fact that I felt as if I couldn't do these things. Like, I felt like there was someone literally telling me I couldn't do these things. So that was really why I stepped into it. It was really more like, let me show them, like let me show them what I can do. And like I've gotten both hands dealt to me. Like, I've gotten like DMs like that, like thank you for being setting an example. But there's also been moments where I'd go to the gym by myself. No one would talk to me. And are you familiar with like an auto belay? Like, there's like these machines. Yeah. There was like an auto belay, and the climb was like an 11 plus, and there was like this group of like 3 white guys trying to do it, and I flashed it the first time, and they weren't talking to me until after I flashed it, and they're asking like what the beta is. So like, what's been very difficult to me is, even though I'm like in this room now, and even though like I feel comfortable, there are still people who still won't talk to me or still won't make me feel included unless I can quote unquote prove what I got. And now that I'm like outside almost climbing like 10As and stuff, it's still kind of like that. Like, no one still takes me seriously unless I can prove what I got. But that's what's tough too. I try not to like consider myself like an influencer, but I do know like there is such thing as like healthy influence. So like I still try to promote like what I'm doing and share what I'm doing. But like I said, like I'm a musician, really not a climber. Climbing just kind of found me. So like with my message on social media, it's been more so a way I can just, what's the word, be an encouragement for people who feel like they are enabled, and whether that is through music, whether that is I'm sorry, not enabled, disabled, whether that is through music or climbing or just hiking. That's how I've tried to just like, that's what I tell my stories through, I guess. And what's been tough now has really been just like the dichotomy of making sure I'm still being true to myself, but also not following, I guess, like not the fad, but the overall theme that like race is the main issue. Because yes, it is, but it's not only race, it's also financial, which goes into race at the end of the day. But what I mainly see is just like a lack of like brotherhood and a lack of also championing people. It's a hard word for me. That's what I've
Yeah.
mainly seen in the lack of, just like championing the Black community, championing others. I also have a friend. I've met him through social media. Well, I actually met him on a podcast I listened to, and his name is Drew Halsey, and he identifies himself as just like an oversized climber. And I've kind of like
Okay.
really just created like a beautiful brotherhood through him, because I
Mm.
myself am a Black climber. He's an oversized climber. You
Hmm.
have two groups of people who see a lack of people that look like us in these spheres.
Yeah.
And we've created a beautiful brotherhood. So we climb together all the time. We go to like the red all the time. But I've loved the way that he has showed me what it looks like to champion people despite how they look
Mm.
racially, despite how they look, like, their physical appearance. So that's when I say, like, I don't want it to just be a racial thing, although race is a big issue. I just want to see all of these things that people see as hindrances that disable them. I just want my
Yeah.
message to be, no, you can do it, but I also want you to know what you're signing up for. You might be the only person
Mm.
in your circle. You might be the only one in your circle of influence, but I want you to know that as long
Mm.
as you know what you're signing up for, there's nothing you can't do. And for me, that was my main
Mm.
hindrance. I like That's why it's hard for me to find words, because I even today I still am trying to learn how to be content with what I signed up for. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like
Mm.
even though I'm doing it, even though like I found people who are in my corner that champion me, that are with me, that are like my ride or dies, that help me, I'm still learning what it looks like. Even after 2020, we're going into a new year, I'm still constantly learning what it looks like to just be content with where I am, with my growth as a climber, with my growth as a musician, with my growth as like an ally in these circles. And when I tell people, or when people ask me, like, what is my main goal, like as a climber, like physically, my answer isn't a physical answer. Like, if I'm being honest, I'm not trying to be the best climber. Like, I've progressed so far so quickly, but
Mhm.
that was never my goal. I'm not trying to go to the Olympics. I'm not trying to do these competitions. I'm just trying to like be the best man I can be. And climbing is helping that. Climbing for me is more
Mhm.
therapeutic than anything. So I hope I answered your question. It was like a very long rabbit
Yeah,
hole answer,
that
but
was
yeah.
wonderful. No, that was so great. And I agree with you so much of this. Like, I think my takeaway from what you just said is like, you should be the lamplighter in your circle of influence. And like, I know that you said you don't like labeling yourself as an influencer, but I think all of us, like, we all have a sphere of influence.
Mhm.
And whether that is, 5 people that you are connecting with every day, or it's like, 66,000 people or 20,000 people or 100,000 people that are like through social media, like, it doesn't matter how big or how small that circle is, like, you
Mhm.
are influencing others.
Absolutely.
And so for you to use your voice and to like show up in these spaces, you are the lamplighter within your influence circle to say, like, I deserve to be here. I'm going to show up. I am going to be the person to represent what I want the world to look like,
Mhm.
and that I want others to know that they can come into this space too. And like, everyone should attempt to be the lamplighter within their circle of influence. And it
Absolutely.
might be scary, but it's like worth the risk.
Mhm.
And it might be lonely and it might be challenging too, but hopefully along the way more people will feel confident enough to become that leader within their circle, to say, like, hey, I want to try this too, and like, nothing's going to hold me back, and like,
Mhm.
maybe I didn't get the invitation, but that doesn't mean that I don't deserve to be here
Right,
too.
and like
And along
I
the
want to
way,
echo
like,
what
that
you
will.
said. Like, don't let that lack of invitation stop you in the first place. Like,
Mhm.
what brought the joy of climbing, if I'm being honest, was going by myself. I was going by myself every day to
Mhm.
the gym, just doing auto belay or just bouldering. And the people I climb with today are the same people that I met when I was just by myself at the gym.
Mhm.
Like, I love the way you just like redefine influence, because that's the exact way I see it. Like, influence isn't this thing that just speaks to the masses. Influence is this thing where
Mhm.
someone can be by you and it rubs off of you, like it's addicting. Like, there's just this joy, like
Yeah.
this aura. So like, if anyone in here is listening and they're like new to climbing, new to hiking, new to camping, like whatever it may be, don't let a lack of numbers or a lack of people at the beginning discourage you, because there were so many times where I almost let that stop me from doing what I wanted to do. Like I remember going to the gym. It was one day, and it was barely any people in there, and I was actually, I think it was maybe one of two people in the entire gym, and I felt so discouraged because I was like, I wanted to be outside, but I didn't have a gym. I didn't have like a climbing partner yet outside. But I just kept going. I kept going, and I actually made friends with like the staff. So like a lot of
Yeah.
my gym friends are now like the staffers. So it's like just don't stop. Don't let anything stop you from pursuing a passion. Even when it's hard, keep going because I feel like the hardest part is actually the part that like bursts joy, and that's the part that actually like turns your hobby into a passion. Because I can now confidently say like climbing was a hobby, but it's now like a passion that found me in the most like
Mhm.
ridiculous way. So
Yeah, and I want to segue this into like you talking about joy in the outdoors too. Of like you've talked a lot about your spirituality and like you experiencing that in the outdoors. So I wanted to give you some space to like share about that. Of like as you were going through the pandemic and you were outside like climbing, at like what your connection to like your spirituality and
mhm.
everything. Like how did that affect you? Like what was that like? Did you feel like that was the connector of like, wow, I feel really connected to something bigger than myself when I'm outside climbing and like, yeah, like what is that like for
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. This give more context. Like I said, like the camps I went to, they were outdoor camps, but they were Christian camps. Maybe some
Hmm.
people have gone to Pine Cove. It's actually a very big camp in Texas, or Kanakuk. I've been to both Pine Cove and Kanakuk up in Missouri. But grew up in a Christian household, and I've always been like the black sheep in terms of how I guess, connect with my spiritual identity. And it wasn't until I was going to these camps where I was like, wow, like nature is just so beautiful. I feel someone with nature
Hmm.
and the creator. Like this is incredible. And even if you date way back to like historic times, like before there were cell phones, before there were all these different things that like took us away from the outdoors, we used the sun to monitor when we rise and when we sleep. It's like we came into the world already like identifying with nature. But with my own journey, I would say like with not just with climbing, just with camping, hiking, with anything that allows me to escape from like the more metropolitan lifestyle. I've really identified with King David, and I've kind of learned like two different things. Like I'm not gonna bore with like the story of King David. If you know, you know. If you don't, you can read it.
Hmm.
But he's basically running from transgression. Like he's running away from something. He's running to the desert. And the question I kind of like ask both King David and myself when I'm like getting away from like the city and going out to nature, I ask myself, what am I running from? And like, what am I running to? Because I think there is such a beautiful juxtaposition of like, if we're like going to the outdoors, we're like escaping to the mountains, like the mountains are calling our name, but
Yeah.
we're also running away from a more comfortable, like house, apart, like whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like the way I've kind of identified with myself. It's really made me feel more rooted in like where I am, where I'm going, and also where I've been. And it makes me also like not take for granted where I've been or where I'm going. So it's just one of the many ways I feel like very rooted in where I am in the outdoors. But yeah, that's just how like my spirituality has kind of been very just encouraged, I guess, by being in the outdoors. Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, so when I think about that, I just think about like when we're escaping to nature. So like when the mountains, like when we say like, the phrase, like, the mountains are calling our name, the
Hmm.
hills are calling me, or, when we get cabin fever, we're kind of stuck.
Hmm.
It's like, yes, it's great to run and get an escape to nature, but I've just learned to protect my spirituality and my sanity to make sure I'm never disregarding what I have at the same time. Because I think what's dangerous is when we can turn nature into a vice
Hmm.
rather than like a healthy escape or like a healthy therapeutic experience.
Hmm.
And I think that our flesh and our spirituality can definitely become somewhat damaged if we like prioritize one over the other.
Hmm.
Like a perfect example, I'm reading a book right now. It's called Sticks and Stones by a lady named Diane Harsha, and I don't want to spoil it because it's a great read, but she's basically an FBI retiree,
Okay.
and she section hikes the AT
Mm.
over a span of 13 years. So the book, she's basically just talking about the balance of like her worldly life, like her job, but also getting outdoors and what it's helped me. And it's not even a Christian book. Like there's nothing spiritual about it. But what it's helped me deal with is making sure that I'm not using either one as an excuse to justify why I'm doing the other. So
Mm.
it just makes me make sure I'm not using um, escaping to the outdoors to justify like why my job might suck right now or why like my friendship might be like falling to shambles. And it makes me also make sure that I'm not using like my job or my girlfriend, like for example, to justify why I can't go climbing with my
Mm.
friends this weekend,
Mm.
or why I can't do like a guy's camping trip. Because I think like both need to coexist, and because we were born into nature, but because we also need community.
Mm.
I just think from my spirituality, I've learned that I have been more grounded in my spirituality, making sure that I like create just a healthy balance of the
Mm.
two. Because I think at the same time, like I forgot which philosopher made the example, but of the two wolves, and he's basically saying like which wolf will win,
Mm.
in like a dog fight, and it's the wolf you feed the most.
Mm.
So I think if all we're doing is feeding like our nature primal instinct, and we're not feeding like our more communicative outlook on society, then we're gonna be just very left vagabonds who just don't know how to like interact with people. But on the contrary, like if we're all we're doing is like living in this metropolitan lifestyle and we're not escaping to nature, then we're not gonna know how to be free. We're not
Mm.
gonna know how to like run. Like I remember being young and watching the horse movie Spirit, I think,
Yeah.
and I just loved I loved the part where you just got to run free, and
Yeah.
I was like a part of us are just called to like run free. So I just think there needs to be a balance in both. And I've seen my spirituality and my faith just grow more
Mm.
when I'm like, God, thank you for creating like an atmosphere where I
Mm.
can go out to. But I also know, God, you're also calling me to like, be in the city, to work 4 shifts this week,
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just think like when we're able to be content and satisfied that there is both and there's a time and place for everything, like I've learned how to be more okay when there are times where like I want to get out, but I have to be a big boy and be like, you know what? I don't got gas money this weekend. I don't got
Mhm.
that kind of
Mhm.
money to just splurge on gas, and like I might need to work more. I
Yeah.
think like God actually honors the next time I go out, and I end up having like an incredible experience
Mm.
because I honored what I gave my yes to, like in the city or in the community I'm in. And I think like my generation, we're so used now to just things coming naturally and things just being super accessible. But I've learned that as accessible as the outdoors are, it's definitely like a luxury, and it's definitely like a
Mm.
privilege that we need to keep sacred. And I never want to like taint that sphere for me. Like I never want to go climbing so much that I become like desensitized to the experience, because like I said, I don't climb to like be the best climber. I climb to be the best person I can be. So if nature and if
Mhm.
the outdoors are just one of those things that's helping me be my best man, then I want to keep that like as sacred as possible. So that's what I mean when I say
Mhm.
like I'm running from something and running to something. And when I kind of had that epiphany, it's definitely what just created more sanity in my spirituality, and that's just my outlook on it now.
I love that. Yeah, because I feel like, especially in modern times too, like we're so attached to like, social media, and like we have so much access to news and like all of this stuff going on, that I feel like we're in a very go 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 society, and we're also very overwhelmed by a lot of different things. And obviously 2020 brought in so much heaviness, like not only with the pandemic but also Black Lives Matter, and like everything that was happening, it was so heavy. And I feel like we saw this huge
Hmm.
shift of people like, I have to go do something and like get outside and breathe. And like we saw so many people, I guess, like access the outdoors in a new way. and try to utilize it for that for exactly what you said, as like that way to become a better person, or just to clear your head and like get away from how heavy things are feeling. But I totally agree that like if you use that as like your only outlet, or like that is what you're doing to
Hmm.
just kind of like it has to be escapism, then it's not healthy anymore. And it should be
Right.
used as like this like therapeutic experience and healing experience, and like to get outside is just to feel good. Like you should feel good,
Right.
and yeah, take care of that experience and
Mhm.
take care of
Like a
yourself. And
perfect example is I remember Fort Worth was getting very crazy with there was both protests and riots, and like as a black man I can say that there is a difference between a protest and a riot. There are both. There are
yes.
protests and riots going on. I don't believe in vandalism or destruction. I only believe in destruction of racist things, not buildings. But I remember the protests and riots were just getting very out of hand. And my cousin and I, we wanted to go to Austin just to go hike, just to get away. And my main motive, like my motif, was I want to get away from this. I'm going to go out. It followed me. I got so many texts. I remember I had an anxiety attack out on the trails, and that never has happened before. So that was like my first experience where I kind of had the epiphany, like, man, like just because I'm running to something, what I'm running away from is gonna follow me, like unless I combat it like head on. So that's kind of what I mean. Like nature is supposed to be this thing where yes, we can relax, we can woosah, we can just be one, but it was never meant to be this thing to just totally abolish our transgression, because our transgression will follow wherever we go. So that's kind of like just my own journey too. I think sometimes it's hard to talk about that, because there's now this culture of kind of like you do your spirituality is yours, which is all true. Like it's very true. But I think like we were never meant to just use nature as this like vice. I think there's a difference between an antidote and a vice. Like I think it's amazing if we're using nature as this thing. Like, you know what? I need a little bit of healing. Like I need a little me time. Like I need a little solo hike. That's beautiful. Like if you're using nature to just kind of like reconnect with yourself. But if we're using nature as a vice, like an excuse to not combat your transgression, that's divisive, and that's very toxic.
The avoidance factor. Yeah.
Hmm.
We still have things we have to come back to and face, and our reality is not always easy to face, but we still have to be in it. Yeah, that's very, very true. I would love to also touch on, I guess, like we've talked about the fact that your background is musical, and you have this new EP that you dropped. And so I want to
Hmm.
know, like, has or does getting outdoors and like everything you've experienced by spending more time in nature, has that impacted your music? And if so,
Oh,
how? And
a
like, how is
thousand
that?
times yes.
Okay, let's talk about it.
So just to give more context, like I said, I grew up in a Christian family, but I also have a dad who's been doing Christian music for years, like before I was born, and he does gospel music. Um, I love gospel music, grew up in it, but I knew that in my future I didn't want to do gospel music. But I thought it was very hard because, kind of like in the outdoor conversation, the gospel genre is a predominantly black genre, the same way the outdoor, or at least the modernized outdoor world, is a predominantly white outdoor world. So, and then at the same time, I went to a predominantly white private school. All the camps I went to were predominantly white. I was the only black kid in like all my circles. So I felt like it was hard because I kind of felt like too black for white people because I had like this black background, but too white for black people because all my interests meant more, white, Caucasian. So in terms of my music, I definitely put music on the back burner for years. I continued to like play in church and do all these things, but I didn't want to pursue something at which I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin yet. So I put it in the back burner, and I noticed that God kind of rewrote my musical journey as I was able to take more risk and kind of like step into who I am as a man. So I remember even how Belmont came to be, like the whole Nashville thing. I grew up playing club soccer, like travel soccer. So I would like have tournaments like in Denver, in California. And when the college admission process was coming up, I almost went to school for soccer. Like here in Texas, I got invited to like the SMU Invitational for 3 week for 3 summers, and that's like how they scout people or whatever. But how I chose Belmont was it's a music school, and I thought it would look really weird if the son of a musical artist didn't go to a music school.
Mm,
So I actually chose Belmont because of like this pressure that I was only putting on myself. Like no,
right.
like at the end of the day, what I'm really grateful for in my dad is he never pressured me to do music. He never pressured me to go like to do these things. But I felt like it would look weird if I didn't. So that's how I
Mm,
chose Belmont. But I'm so glad I did because I chose Belmont for music. Little did I know that God would rewrite my outdoor journey. And
yeah.
it was in Nashville where I found climbing. It was in Nashville where I fell in love with like hiking and stuff. So it's just really interesting how that works. How my music came into play is as I became more comfortable in my own skin being in the outdoors, I definitely became comfortable in my own skin in terms of like musicality and like my
Mm,
interest. So like whenever I tell people like my musical influences, they like I wish I could like show you the look on their faces. So
yeah.
like the kind of people I listen to like Gregory Alan Isakov. I listen to like
Okay.
Nathaniel Rateliff and like the Night Sweats and like Ruth
Yes.
Boyabeck and like all these people that black people don't really listen to. It's like I
Mm,
finally felt comfortable that I could even share that I listen to these people because I grew up listening to them and like even before them I like went through my like a metal phase. Like I listened to like
yeah.
Beartooth and like of Mice and Men. Like my musical vocabulary is like all over the place. But for some reason I felt like I couldn't I don't know. I felt like I just couldn't share that because
Mm,
it wasn't normal. So I'm glad I put music on the back burner because the Lord like legit rewrote my musical journey.
mm,
And as I was going on those hikes and as I was going camping, I was just writing poems about like where I've like how like where I am, like what I'm doing. And
yeah.
I was writing these poems, not even like writing songs. It wasn't until this past year, actually, 2021, what I did going into this past year. I don't know if you're familiar with a conference called Passion. It's a very big
Oh,
Christian conference based in Atlanta, Georgia. I was there, um, and I kind of had this epiphany where I felt like God was asking me. He was like, "Hey, like you're going into 2021. You're turning 21 this year. For the first 21 weeks of your life, all I really want you to do is like tap into the things that make you feel the most connected with me, with God." And I felt like those things were hiking, climbing, biking. Like I actually took my dad's old road bike. So
mm,
I got into all these things. And I actually got off social media for 21 weeks. So I did like a 21-week kind of cleanse of social media, and I just did what I wanted to do. I just tapped
mm,
into my own kind of cowboy, vagabond instinct. And it was during those 21 weeks where God was like, "Hey, you've been writing these poems on your adventures. Keep writing them because at the end of these 21 weeks, I'm going to do something crazy with them." And I'm like, "All
mm,
right, cool." So I just kept writing on my journeys and like kept taking pictures. So like the majority of the pictures like you see on social media or the writings are like all these thoughts and notes that I took
mm,
on my adventures during those 21 weeks of just fasting and doing what I wanted to do. But like I said, like I was just writing these poems, not really intending to like write an album or an EP. And it was in the summer where I went on a 2 week road trip with some friends, and I think that's when we kind of like got more connected when we were in we did Colorado and Utah,
yeah.
and that's when I like kind of see like all the poems just like knit together to
Mm,
form this body of work. So the EP was something that was technically not like finished, but I guess it's like final process during the summer. And I felt like there was still something that was still missing. And I think what was missing is kind of like what I touched on a couple minutes back was just like the content portion.
mhm,
Like, I know that the music industry and the music business industry, it's one of the most flawed industries. And I think because music is so accessible, like the
mhm,
fact that you can make music on a device like this
mhm,
nowadays and
mhm,
put it out into the world, like because it's so accessible, because everyone's trying to do it, it is flawed. there are a lot of gray areas. So what I wanted to make sure that I was content with before I released music was I'm not trying to be big when I'm doing this. Like I'm not trying to be like selling out arenas because at the same way, I think that's what the outdoor world is. Like
Oh,
when you step into like this world, I think you're supposed to know like I might not be the best climber. I might not be the best, like whatever it is. I think it's just solely experiencing nature for nature's sake. I just wanted to make sure that the same mentality I had for nature that I had for my music and for like my message. So I purposefully didn't release it during the summer, even though it was done. And I'm glad I did that because there were like things I actually learned within that process from August to November that actually enhanced my music even more. So, for example, there's a song on my EP called Forever Man, and I actually re-recorded the entire thing within that process or time frame from August to November. So like the Forever Man that's out, like the one that people are hearing now, sounds totally different from like the prior to August Forever Man. So like
okay.
that's why I'm glad I waited because like I feel like as long as you are going into like this outdoor journey of like finding yourself and making sure that you're okay with yourself,
Yeah.
I think that like the creator and just the world will honor that process of patience. And the same way I speak towards like the sacredness of nature, that's how I view just like artistry and music, like keeping it sacred, just knowing like you're doing it for yourself. Like, yes, at the end of the day, music is for the consumer, the same way like a brand is for the consumer, but I think like as long as you're staying true to your mission, the mission is what brings people to the brand.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like the
Yes.
mission, like the authenticity is what brings people to your room, to your table. The same way we just talked about like how can we abolish like the invitation?
Yes.
Authenticity. I
Yes.
think true authenticity and true generosity is like what brings people to those tables. So with my music, I think it is what it is today because I waited, and I'm so glad I waited. So yeah, that's just kind of how like music has kind of intertwined with my outdoor journey.
It's incredible. Yeah, I love hearing how it's just like enriched and made you more patient and gave you this perspective of saying like, hey, there's beauty in the waiting and like just slowing down and appreciating the process and appreciating what you're creating and like allowing it just to be instead of trying to have expectations around things too. And
Right.
like simply relishing in the joy of it. I think that that's beautiful. I'm super excited for other people to hear what you've been creating too, because I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like I have a few like wrap up questions for you. So,
Yeah.
I just want to say that this has been such an amazing conversation, and I really am excited for people to hear all of this, just like your perspective on taking the risk, being the leader, and allowing yourself to be the person, that one person, if you need to be. I think that you being bold enough and brave enough to be that person within your sphere has been really inspiring and encouraging for a lot of people, especially because you do have a reach. So I hope that you keep doing what you're doing because it is very
Thank
inspiring
you.
and like we love to follow it and we love to hear your words and your experiences and your perspectives. So my wrap up questions for you. My first one is, what does keep nature wild mean to you?
I think we kind of already touched it. And what's crazy is I actually asked myself that question when I even like stumbled across you guys a couple months ago. I think like the sacredness, like the preservation, and I think like I actually had a conversation with my friend Cade. He's amazing, and we're talking about like wildfires and just like the wildfires that have been happening
Yeah.
during this time. And as much as it sucks that that's happening, like I don't know how else to like describe how that feels when I see it. Like that sucks
Yeah.
because as much as I want to do something, I can't.
Yeah.
But that's what nature is. Nature is what nature is. I think it's just acknowledging that there's something beautiful still about like the sacredness and the preservation of allowing nature what it is to be. And that's why, like, when I do see stuff about like dumb people vandalizing rocks, I'm like, "Don't do that, please." It's like just
Yes.
something as simple as that, just like leaving nature what it is.
Mm.
But yeah, just like when I hear keep nature wild, I think like the vagabond cowboy mentality. Keep it sacred, keep it
Mm.
there, like allow it to be what it is. Don't try to change it, but impact it. I think there's a difference between trying to change something versus trying to impact something.
Mm.
We can impact nature, like by like the small like I love how you guys sent me like the trash bags because I still use
Yeah.
those and I
Yeah.
get so much more and like there are certain things we can do to keep nature wild and keep
Yeah.
nature sacred. And I think what you guys are doing, your mission perfectly instills what it means to keep nature
Whew.
sacred, to keep nature wild. So yeah.
Thank you. And that was a beautiful introspection of what it is. And I love what you're saying about just like, let it be what it is, and not trying to put our mark on it, I guess. Like
Mhm.
we're very lucky that we get to go out and experience like things on trails and like trail creation and stuff. But when we come across, petroglyphs and artifacts and stuff, it's like just let it be what it is. Let us appreciate what it is. And carving into trees and things like that. It's like just let it be and appreciate it for what we're getting from it instead of trying to like always mark it and like say
Yeah.
that we've been here, right? Like it doesn't need to
I
be
think the
that way.
best way we can practice doing that now is like when you see something like that, I think, yes, our mindset should like capture what we're seeing, but I think the first thing we should think about is like a legacy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very privileged to see this. I
Mm-hmm.
want this to be here for my child to see it. I want to
Yes.
bring my child here. I want my child to bring their child here. It's
Yes.
like, I think if we have that mentality, like, how can we create longevity within nature? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what it means to keep nature wild. Like, how can we just keep it so like the future generations can see what we're seeing
Yes.
now too?
Yes. 100%. I couldn't agree with that more. That's amazing. And I fully believe that myself. Yeah. It's like, I want to experience this at the way that I am. And I would love for like everyone that comes after me to be able to see this in its most pristine state as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And then my last question for you is basically tell people where to find you. Where can they find you on
Yeah.
social media? Where can they find your EP? What's it called? Like, let everyone know.
Hmm. Yeah, my EP is called The Cedars, named after my grandparents live in Cedar Hill, Texas. You can find it wherever you stream music, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. I'm most active on Instagram. You can find me at Caziah Franklin, Caziah Franklin. Franklin's the easy part. But yeah, I'm like an old man when it comes to social media, so like I'm not really super active. But yeah, if you just want to find me, keep up with my journey, what I'm doing, I would really appreciate it.
And also, you can go back and read posts that he's already written. They're very inspiring. And when you do share your words, they are wonderful. So even if they're not being shared constantly, when you do drop things, I'm always like, wow, that was really insightful and wonderful. So there's always value to be had. And like we said, we can always learn from everyone. So I highly recommend everyone go follow you and learn from your perspectives and your experience and like what you have to share about your outdoor experience and music and spirituality and everything else. So thank you so much for
Thank you so
sharing
much,
time
Bree.
with me
Appreciate
and
it.
coming on here.
Absolutely.
Can't wait to continue to follow your journey. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.